It's really rare for me to review a mod and make claims without caveats. Modders are amateurs who do work for free, and so everything good has to be good for a mod. Good if it were finished. Good attempt but flawed execution. It's honestly kind of tiring. Autumn Leaves for New Vegas is a refreshing change of pace, and this video is going to be an explanation of what it does so well and why I love it so much. If there ever was a mod I had to show to people to explain why I do what I do, why I review mods and treat them like games in themselves, like art worth taking seriously, I'd show them Enderal. But then afterwards, I'd probably show them this. Let's get into it. Autumn Leaves was developed by one person and released in 2015, and for a nearly decade-old mod, yeah, that's not wrong, I hate it too, it's still standing strong as one of the most inspired, creative, and unique mods for New Vegas. There are a lot of mods out there that you can clearly see have had their influence. For example, the craze of DLC-sized mods for New Vegas can at least somewhat be attributed to modders' reaction to early projects like New California. Once someone proves that something is possible, there will be a whole host of others who want to replicate their innovation with their own spin, their preferred improvements, setting, ideas, etc. Knowing this, it seems initially sort of puzzling why so few mods of Autumn Leaves' kind exist. Autumn Leaves is just big enough to feel like a DLC, but not nearly big enough to feel like an expansion. It takes place in one location with a small cast of characters and one cohesive story. I can't really think of any mod off the top of my head which imitates this structure, whereas I can think of several which have worked with the multiple location format of a Some Guy series, or the DLC-sized New World Space format of a New California. I think at least part of this is that Autumn Leaves' format isn't at face value ambitious or sexy in the way that a total conversion or big questline style mod is, but what I found with Autumn Leaves is that it's far more sophisticated than a lot of mods 6 or even 8 times its size. A lot of the reasons why I love this mod so much have to do with its reduced scale and density. Autumn Leaves is a 6 to 10 hour campaign in one vault, and it's not even a super expansive vault by the standards of the game. It has basically no combat and a combined total of like 6 NPCs. How it gets its runtime out of this relatively small area, complete lack of combat, and low number of NPCs is a loop of exploration and dialogue which held my interest the entire way through multiple times. The Nexus page lists the mod's influences as the older Fallouts, Planescape Torment, and Arcanum, which are massive shoes to fill, but I can't lie and say that that doesn't make me like childishly giddy to read. It's nice to be pandered to. The only other thing worth mentioning before we get into plot is that the music for this mod is uniquely well composed and well utilized. You'll be hearing it throughout this video, and it establishes the tone of different areas and different reveals spectacularly. Probably my favorite use of ambient music in a mod that we've covered so far, and it's rare that a mod uses its soundscape so intentionally. Most times if ambient music is made for a mod, it kind of just fades into the background, but that couldn't be further from the case here. The conceit for the story, as communicated in its opening cutscene, is that an influential group of pre-war intellectuals designed a vault meant to store the accumulated knowledge of humankind in a secure underground library. In the pre-war period, there was, according to this mod at least, a frightening amount of censorship and moral panic, in line with the 50s we knew in our world. In the event of a nuclear catastrophe or some extreme action by the censors, we wouldn't be starting over from nothing. We'd have all of our old world knowledge, our literature, our science, and our history ready for us to rebuild with. Unluckily for them, the bombs dropped long before expected, and one man, a professor of artificial intelligence, was trapped inside. Finding this library and being admitted on the fact that you're taken to be a peaceful vault dweller, you enter to find a robot with a very cordial personality who welcomes you to the library.
Greetings, I am James, Rapco Protectron Unit 13882.
Offers you a room to stay in, and asks what it feels like to kill a person.
You already killed someone, didn't you? How did it feel?
Being very put off by that, you speed walk away from this robot, James, only to stumble upon the skeleton of Professor Cartwright, the creator of all of the robots and the man who was trapped in the vault with them, his skeleton lying under a collapsed bookcase. It was pushed, and therefore Cartwright was murdered by one of his creations. What could be called the main quest of the mod involves solving a murder which took place long before you showed up and whose principal subjects are robots of the murdered man's creation. This, like all good mysteries, is a simple question with a lot of smaller, more complicated questions folded into and around it like a mind map of different variables which add up to a bigger picture. Who was Professor Cartwright? Why did he make these robots, and how sentient really are they? How do you figure out the potential motives of characters you're not yet fully sure can have anything other than directives? If they are fully machines and not sentient, why is there a graveyard full of Mr. Handies out front? Who, other than these robots, has been here? What did they want? What did they learn? And most concerningly, Why does it feel like you're always being watched? The first hour or two of Autumn Leaves very quickly makes you aware of the big question, the mystery to be solved by the end, but then, or in some cases even before the inciting incident, it hits you with a dozen more questions, and the process of solving the wider mystery is a process of slowly putting the discoveries behind all of the vault's seemingly unrelated leads together. So from the outset, the narrative has given you a lot to think about. That's a big part of what makes Autumn Leaves so engaging, but it's what makes its plot engaging. That's good, but it's not great, because you've just dumped a load of questions on the player, but you haven't yet locked them into wanting to figure them out. Autumn Leaves' game design comes in to remedy this through its loop. You have all of these questions, this web of mysteries to uncover, and there are two forces, two spheres of gravity with which it gets you to find those answers. The first is its cast of characters. Uncovering the mystery behind Cartwright is largely a matter of figuring out the robots of the library, learning about them, their experiences, memories, personalities, and feelings. Maybe, we'll put a pin in that one. Each of these characters will have their own mysteries to sort out. James, who we met, asks a lot of strange questions. As the de facto leader of the group, he should know a lot, but when he's not asking you to do things or asking you to tell him things about being human, he ends up telling you very little other than strict facts.
A testament, an heir, is sometimes all people need to leave this existence in peace.
Of all the performances in the mod, I think his was the weakest on account of him, to my ear, being a European of some variety trying to do some hybrid of American and British English that shifts quite often into one or the other, and sometimes even into regional dialects, like when he slips into Texas.
Back when titles were still relevant, he was a professor at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and Chief Science Officer of RAPCO. I will be expecting our next conversation. In the meantime, please make yourself comfortable in our library.
James is a really fascinating character though, as he ought to be, seeing as he's your main quest giver. Roland is the robot with the cowboy hat in charge of the living quarters, who's programmed to be an asshole to everyone.
Welcome to Library Day, Roland. Don't steal any of my shit, okay? Looks like you can't read anyways, so I probably don't have much to worry about.
Roland should know tons about the vault's previous residents from the wasteland, but he's the least likely to tell you anything. Not necessarily because he can't, but more so because he can't be asked. A lot of the allure of Roland's character is figuring out why he's like that. Like, what possible purpose could Cartwright have had for programming one of his few companions in the vault to be annoying, confrontational, and unhelpful?
A writer of great renown had it all. Friends, family, wealth. He wondered why he couldn't write anymore. He despaired. He cried. He drank. Why? He yelled, while tossing away heaps of single-worded scripts. Why can't I write anymore? It's simple, my dear, said his wife, freshly awoken. You're not suffering enough. She added, I can help you with that.
Helena is the vault's medic and therapist for Cartwright and all of the vault's visitors. She knows maybe even more than Roland or James about every human who's come into the vault, but because she often swore confidentiality or wiped her memories of her sessions, she can't tell you nearly as much as you'd like. Helena is the most warm, kind, and friendly of the characters in this vault, but she's also deeply troubled herself. She's going through an almost existential crisis, having her entire job and purpose surround understanding humans, but being literally, physically unable to relate to the human experience such that she could save the people around her in the way that she'd want, the way her creator would want.
Once upon a time, a child had a music box he held very dear, though he loved nothing more than hearing the box's sweet melody. He wanted to know how its mechanisms worked. He knew that by breaking open the box, he could have a glimpse of what was inside, and perhaps even a bit comprehend how it worked. Of course, he feared he couldn't repair it afterwards, opening the box and risking to break it, or leaving it the way it was. Eventually, the child would make his choice.
James made me curious and a little nervous, Roland made me frustrated and made me laugh, but Helena is the most complex of the characters because while she comforted me and made me like these characters, she also made me sad, not just for her but for all three of them, trapped in a vault, unable to fully understand humans or themselves. Being given the questions gives you intrinsic motivation to want to solve the mystery. You want the questions answered because you like learning things, solving puzzles, or figuring stuff out. Interacting with the characters gives you extrinsic motivation. You want to solve this for them. And finally, you're given even more intrinsic motivation through the mod's main mechanical innovation, printing cards. Inside Cartwright's office is a terminal with which you can exchange little cards you can find around the vaults for unique perks. You can only get so many, but you're mechanically, for the sake of the rest of your playthrough after the mod, selfishly incentivized to get as many as you can, which means exploring every nook and cranny of the vault to find these cards, and in doing so, you do what you would otherwise be doing by following the quest objectives and hunting down leads. So you have 3 different sources of motivation to figure the story out. You have the mechanical incentive, the character incentive, and the incentive of the mystery in itself. The Fallout series in general is really good at doing this, New Vegas in particular. All open world games with main quests have this deep internal tension occurring between the developers' obligations as game designers and their obligations as narrative designers. On one hand, you're a designer of a story, and designing a story means setting a pace, making something compelling, and giving the player incentives through character or plot to continue the story. But at the same time, you're pulled in the opposite direction by your goals as a game designer designing an open world you want players to want to explore. The way that New Vegas and the original Fallouts, and even Fallout 3 to an extent, ease this contradiction is to lay crucial story areas along the most likely path of exploration, so your exploration yields both intrinsic gameplay rewards and extrinsic story rewards. We will be returning to this topic in upcoming Fallout 4 mod videos, so do the engagement thing if you want to see that. I'm so sorry. Autumn Leaves does this exact thing, but in a very small location. This is masterful and leads to one of the most engaging loops of any mod I've played. If you wondered how this mod stayed so engaging without combat, this is how. For example, you're told to find a holotape somewhere and given no quest markers about where it is. That would be tedious or maybe even frustrating if you weren't already running around this vault knocking the potted plants over for printing cards. The gameplay reinforces your contributions to the story and vice versa. You want to keep playing because you have so many things to discover and so many reasons to want to discover them. There are several other characters I haven't mentioned, like the characters of the people whose audio logs and notes you find. You learn a lot about them too, or the big array of computers and wires, the Leviathan spider who only answers open-ended questions, and only answers them in riddles. You heard his commentary on the main characters earlier. What this robot's motivations are is a mystery that's answered only at the very end, but until then, his answers are important and thought-provoking.
Long ago, a young man with an extensive spiritual life made a pact with a spirit. In exchange for his ability to speak, he learned an important, fundamental secret about the purpose of man. Of course, the moment he learned this secret truth, his voice was silenced for the rest of his life.
Or, even more strange, some of the terminals in the vault sometimes talk to you. They keep giving you hints, pointing you in the right direction, and working with you towards the solution to the murder. There's no direct answer as to who this is in the entire mod, and the developer refuses to answer who it is, but he insists that the mod has enough hints to form your own ideas. There are more robots in the basement to talk to, which you only access in the final third of the mod. A childlike robot named Edgar.
Everything is just smashing down here. There's my room for starters, which, as you can see, has been decorated with the utmost taste and refinement.
And the source of all those maintenance bots out front. Again, more on that later. The first leg of the main quest involves James tasking you with learning about some visitors the vault had years ago who didn't reveal much about themselves or left in a hurry. I won't break down each one, but most notable to me were the pair of visitors from the Brotherhood of Steel and the Ghoul, who apparently was here during the time you were here and eventually took his own life in the vaults, obviously much to the dismay of Helena. Many of these visitors had something troubled to them mentally, which Helena wrecked herself over an inability to help. But this moment in particular was a real downer, especially given the quality of writing in his notes and his presence lingering in the vault through environmental storytelling. You never meet any of these other visitors, and you only ever hear a few of them through holotapes, but they're all in themselves excellent and interesting characters. One moment more back to the gameplay story interaction thing. In one of the quests, you're tasked with finding a way into the Brotherhood of Steel people's room, and the way that I found my way in was by listening to one of the holotapes they left behind, hearing one of them voice annoyance at the other one always playing pool.
Knight Roger hasn't been the most helpful auxiliary. It is rather safe to say that his main preoccupations were playing the pool table and stuffing himself with pre-war food.
Going to the pool tables and finding that he loved pool so much that he left his keycard there. It's clever, and there being no map markers in this entire quest made it very satisfying to go there and have my guess be correct. But seeing how thoroughly I spent searching some of the other rooms for printing cards, if I was a little bit less interested in the story, I could have totally seen myself finding this by accident. Audio logs and notes are something I think a lot of mods use as time and labor saving tools, and rightfully so. Finding voice actors with competent equipment or doing all of the work to put an NPC actor in your space are substantially more work than just leaving a note or having an intentionally crackly voice recording. But while Autumn Leaves does it a lot, I think it does it really well. The overall vibe of Autumn Leaves is enhanced by a lack of other humans. The vault feels at first like humanity has left it. The whole of the plot surrounds humanity's leaving of the vault as signified by Cartwright's passing. Walking around the vault, noticing the remains of humanity, its mess, its trinkets, its notes, tells an entirely different story. The vault is a library, but the majority of the learning you do comes not from its books, but from the little pieces of the past and current inhabitants that they left behind. Contrary to first impressions, the vault is full to the brim with indirect humanity, little traces of what makes us, and this is relayed especially in the side quests of its inhabitants. I did a little overview of their characters before, but Helena and Roland have their own quests, which give them development and change their ending slides. I think the quest for Helena is a lot more impactful, so we'll start with Roland's little wild goose chase. Early in the mod, you can realize that the vault has a massive stash of bottle caps somewhere, and only Roland knows where it is. This quest has a lot of fun parts, but I think my favorite moment in it is right here. Roland is a master bullshitter. He misdirects, acts unhelpfully, and is annoying as a fact of his existence. So when he asks you what you want the bottle caps for, he won't give you correct hints unless you tell him the truth. Unless you tell him you want them because they're money and your stupid people use bottle caps as money where you come from, he will give you a hint that leads nowhere. And the only way you have to know that this is a hint that leads nowhere is to go to where he says the hint is and then not find it for the rest of the mod. If you do tell the truth though, you're led on a scavenger hunt around the vault, playing again into the exploration loop I mentioned, finding those caps, but more importantly, finding a hard-coded phrase which forces Roland to tell the truth, revealing a lot of information about him and his relationships with James and Helena that you wouldn't otherwise have access to. He has a lot of hidden familial affection for Helena and feels for everything she's going through. He even thinks that he and his fellow robots have souls, and that the library holds them back from their potential as autonomous individuals. Roland is the most frustrating character to begin with, but has the most clear development. It's well handled, interesting, and still funny, as all of Roland's dialogue is. As you're the newest human in the vault, Helena is quick to psychologically examine you. This quest is the most memorable of anything in the mod for me because I adored the way it canonizes player behaviors. Because it's the year 2024 and YouTube video essayist is a saturated market full of idea repetition, I hesitate to use the phrase ludonarrative dissonance like at all. Like I feel like if I use it, I'm like putting a big stamp on my forehead that says sued. But unfortunately, this quest necessitates it by targeting it directly. Helena asks you a series of questions about your behavior after being shot, in particular seeking to answer a question that has no necessarily clear answer in the base game. Why go after Benny? What kind of mental pathology leads someone to wander across hundreds of kilometers of Nevada desert to find someone who shot and nearly killed them? As a player in a game, this question has an obvious answer. You want answers. It's an adventure. There's no risk. It's all a game. For a person, this question is a lot more relevant. The developer put out a post on Tumblr explaining some of this. There are a whole host of game-specific manifestations of frontal lobe damage in New Vegas. Already mentioned partially with Benny as a habit to underestimate risks, but further, language impairment, as seen through the courier's inability to say anything in conversation the entire game longer than a few sentences. Some people with frontal lobe damage experience violent impulses and uncontrollable reactions, which is self-explanatory as well. Even more deep into the systems, the player starting the game with such low stats can be explained by frontal lobe damage's effect on muscle movement and hand-eye coordination. This stuff is fascinating, and I love when games sometimes pull attention to the ways in which player behavior is bizarre to regular people. New Vegas definitely reads a little differently if you take the courier to be what they are, someone with frontal lobe damage running around putting themselves in extremely dangerous situations for little to no reason at all. In the course of your therapy with Helena, you find out that subconsciously you had no reason in mind for chasing Benny, not at all, and Helena's task the entire time has been to give you the option to sort that part out for yourself. And this is, in a way, at least a little reminiscent of the what can change the nature of a man question in Planescape Torment. What you choose here has a lot less to do with the quest you're doing it in than it does to do with the character you're defining and what they value, what they want, who they are subconsciously. What would lead your character to chase Benny? Justice? Revenge? Answers, rage, or you can even say that you still don't know, but that it doesn't matter. In any case, you have your answer, and Helena has done her job and reaffirmed her capacity to help people. In the basement of the library, you can find Edgard, and most important for the plot, a maintenance bot you can restore the personality of. The maintenance bot becomes kind of like your detective partner in your search for Cartwright's murder during the second half of the story, a very no-nonsense, logical character who you can bounce your ideas off of to sort out what you really think happened.
Where do you want to start? Who do you think did it? Was it an accident? Was it a murder? Why? Correct. What's next?
He hasn't had a personality since before Cartwright died. No personality, no motive, no suspect. Why he had his personality module taken away is part of the mod's turn towards halfway villainizing Cartwright. The mod doesn't outright make him appear evil, but it doesn't pull its punches either. The maintenance bot wanted the robots to be more free, more human, respected, and Cartwright pretty much literally dehumanized him for it. Finding your way into Cartwright's office kicks off the final leg of the story. Cartwright made these robots to grow, to become human essentially, but confined them in a small space and programmed them to follow strict rules. Rules that Cartwright himself allowed them to break when a group of raiders attacked the library and he allowed them to kill. Later, Cartwright sought to make changes to the library, to edit its contents. He started destroying books. The exact thing he allowed his robots to kill people so that they couldn't do. It was James who killed Cartwright to protect the library, and he admits as much as soon as you find the proof. But it's not quite over here, because James was encouraged to kill Cartwright. He couldn't have done it without encouragement that Cartwright had dementia and he couldn't manage the library anymore. And this encouragement came from the one and only Arthur, the massive computer that speaks in riddles. If you've watched pretty much any of my videos by now, you'll know that I'm a really big sucker for themes, for stories with ideas and underlying messages which give a certain glow to their dialogue, plots, and worlds when viewed in retrospect. Themes and ideas make a story feel like a package, like a bundle of finely trimmed intentionalities which portray something greater than the bundle's individual pieces. Autumn Leaves is excellent in this regard because this thematic consistency idea is something New Vegas already does phenomenally well, especially in DLCs, and rather than trying super hard to break from this convention, Autumn Leaves plays into New Vegas' already established ideas. Autumn Leaves is, on its surface, a mod about robot sentience and artificial intelligence, but this is what you could only really consider layer 1. These ideas are important to Autumn Leaves, but they're important as context, as a contributor to its more significant main theme. The library vault was, however well-intentioned, an attempt at controlling the future in a way. The creators of the vault wanted their vision of and for the world to carry into the future long after they died and the world blew itself up. Cartwright, being trapped alone in the vault, did the same with himself, his personality, his own legacy, by creating these robots to be the stewards of his knowledge transfer. No character exemplifies the issues with this approach like Arthur.
I've been observing you long enough to give you some modicum of credit. You are playing a dangerous game, human. I can still shut the door, the vents, and asphyxiate you with CO2. And even if the turrets are not under my control anymore, they will defend me if they identify you as a threat to me.
The riddles were a facade, and the final boss of Autumn Leaves is a conversation with a character who exemplifies the stuck-in-their-ways nature the mod overall critiques. Arthur was here, forever watching, judging, and assuming that he, from Cartwright, knows what's best for both the library and, to an extent, the world at large. Arthur's presence is everywhere in the mod. Every glowing red eye is him, watching, judging. He calls attention to player behavior, too. If you raid the armory or pick up too many skill magazines, Arthur will comment on your selfishness, your lack of care for the library.
Trying to scrape up everything you could.
Food, money, weapons, medicine.
Going through every nook and cranny to find something of use.
Eagerly reading books with all kinds of unsavory military knowledge.
And for what? To become a better person. To learn something about the world.
No, it was not about knowing oneself better. It was about getting revenge.
Quite cryptically throughout the mod, Cartwright's legacy is referred to. And initially it appears as though Cartwright's legacy is the library itself. And then maybe it's the means by which the robots are programmed, their iRobot style directives which ensure they keep the library in the way Cartwright would have wanted. What you find instead in his office is a holotape which would free the robots from their parameters, giving them full ability to more or less think for themselves, leave the library if they want, act in ways they were never directed to. Cartwright's legacy is an acceptance of change. In the end, you can convince Arthur to let you go on the basis that his programming doesn't account for this change. The logic that he was programmed with is insufficient to account for that which is. He can only make decisions based on what has been. Acceptance of change is sort of the message of New Vegas more broadly, as I've covered before on this channel in multiple videos, but there's sort of an auxiliary message to be found in Autumn Leaves as it relates to art and creation. Maybe even like parenting, if that's your thing. Once you create something, it's no longer yours. That creation, regardless of what you think about it, changes, evolves, and is interpreted in new ways for as long as people still pay attention. To make an AI and then limit its personality to match specific parameters you and only you control neglects the kind of change that represents the purpose of an AI to begin with, to learn. It's almost like making a library full of books nobody can add or remove from, or books where you can't scribble in the margins, tear pages out, or crease the spines of. The vain motivation for legacy is to control the way people think about you after you're gone, to leave a mark so specific and defined that no one can say that you were anything but exactly what you told them you were. James references Autumn Leaves as a simile for the action which killed his master, the tearing of pages out of books. But there's more to it. The bombs dropped in autumn, in October. The orange glow of nuclear fire changed everything they touched. Like any autumn, though, after all the autumn leaves fall and die, autumn leaves. We aren't stuck in time like the library was. Cartwright's legacy and the player's finding and fulfilling of it is Cartwright's final acknowledgement of change as a fundamental, unstoppable, and maybe even positive force. The endings reflect this. Just like I didn't go over every quest, I'm not going to go over every ending, but there are a substantial number of endings, almost a weirdly high number of them for such a small mod. The ending slides cover what happens to the library, what happens to its inhabitants, and what happens to the courier, what they learn and take away from the experience. That is, unless you take the early ending where you do Helena's therapy and your takeaway is fuck this noise and you leave the Mojave forever, ending the game then and there. Fun addition. Back to the Arthur conversation though. This dialogue encounter has dozens of choices to make, and the way that skills function in this pseudo boss fight is really interesting. Persuading Arthur is a matter of, like in the classic Fallout games, picking the right options. Saying the right things, picking the right options. Rather than picking the speech button to win, you have to pick the most convincing arguments, and the role of the skill checks is that they give you multiple tries. If you fail to convince Arthur, if you have a high enough speech, you can try again. Same with repair, science, barter, and maybe more that I didn't even run across. But passing these speech checks doesn't convince Arthur for you. You have to do that yourself. And the best part of this to me is that the argument you provide makes sense. You're not just picking at straws until you pull the right one, as you have to convince a strictly logical machine that there's a contradiction between what he says and what he does. For example, his programming makes him value the pursuit of knowledge and the protection of knowledge, but he condemns you for seeking the truth about Cartwright instead of reading all these books. To him, that's proof you don't care about the library, about knowledge. But seeking the truth is about gaining knowledge, isn't it? You want to know the truth, not just abstractly have it in the greedy way he accuses you of. There are a lot of good points you can make to Arthur, but in this instance, you convince him not by telling him your thoughts about how immoral he is or by clicking a big button that says speech, but by playing his game, which is what makes conversations like this the most interesting, feel the most like an honest persuasion. By his own merits, his own values, what he has done is logically, not morally or practically, incorrect, and this sends him into a spiral. He rationalizes, much like the others, that he is becoming human, but instead of pushing towards this, grasping for human experience and feelings, he's disgusted by it. He lets you remove his personality so he can get his wish of being perfectly, boringly, unpowerfully logical. A tool, a machine in the strict utilitarian sense of the word. And once this happens, the vault is under new management. As people entered the library, they ruined it. Stole books, knocked stuff over, ate all the food. Arthur was right, in a way. A lot of people in need outside absolutely would raid this place if he left control, but the place stayed standing. The place got wrecked, but not ruined, and its ideas, its store of knowledge, became a more open in and out flow than the strict border it once was. Some of the robots found their way outside to freedom, to learn new things freely for the first time in their lives. The legacy of Cartwright, his knowledge and his creations, are finally allowed to evolve. I have no talent in actually putting mods together. I'm completely useless with anything like that, but I think if I ever got the chance to work on a mod for this game or for any game in the series, I'd look to Autumn Leaves as a primary source of inspiration. There is no mod I've played that feels more intentional than Autumn Leaves. It weaves all of its content together through the main story such that all of it is relevant and none of it is busy work. Its mechanical considerations are added smartly in ways that add to the exploration and discovery loop. It doesn't weigh itself down with long corridor shooting, loot, and all the things I could take or leave from New Vegas to begin with. Mechanically and narratively, it does new things while not deviating so far from what already works. It fits in context with the main game like no mod I've ever played. Its music, its characters, its environment, its pacing. I love almost everything about this mod. A lot of people did. Enough that this mod's success started the author's foray into game development where he is now. Good endings all around, I guess. Before I close this one out, I want to give a brief shout out to my patrons for sticking with me through this project and every missed deadline before it. If you want to support me, you can subscribe, leave a like or a comment, or pledge to me on Patreon for a low fee at a per video basis. Thank you as always to Adam Souza, Autumn Vector, Bastard27, Bear Van Helsing, Cody Jones, Dream Cream, It's Ducktastic, Jack Bradley, Jacob Dulick, Jaden Graham, Mega Crunch, Michael Aversa, Mike Woods, Ryan Little, Spritz, Talia Modnell Hemke, and that other Keanu. You know, I think unless something big comes out or something in particular catches my eye, I'm gonna leave New Vegas mods alone for a while. I'm done university now, so I should have a little more time to do the video stuff, and I have a lot more non-New Vegas content to get at. That being said, the next big video is gonna be a while. Part of the reason this video took so long is because I've already started on that, and it's hooked me. By the time we get there, I might be a little jet lagged. See you then.